And for today's meditation, I'm meditating on the Kundalini concept of America. Let it go, let it go. Can't remember what we're going to talk about anymore. So let's talk about roller coasting. Let's talk about the history of roller coasting and how we were doing it. When was it? Like 2002, 2003?
We started in 2000.
It was right at the turn of the century is when I taught you guys roller coasting, otherwise known as remote viewing, but I didn't know that it was a skill that the psychic teams with the Army and Navy and everyone were taught. It was just something I discovered by accident. I was talking to someone on ICQ actually.
Yep.
And he and I were talking, and he got me so hyper I just kind of started accidentally looking at stuff, and I kept looking smaller and smaller and smaller, and then I'm looking in this strange place that was so tiny that you couldn't even see color, and I described it and then I sketched it for him, and he's like, whatever. And then an hour later he came back with some photographs of subatomic particles that had just been released that month before, and that's where I was. I was remote viewing subatomic particles. I wanted to talk about how it's possibly, you know, how it's possible. Maybe I've been to Mars. Maybe. It would be a speculative piece. And I don't get to talk about that today because there's something else that has come up. There is this space station area I used to go to. Well, I kind of call it the Intergalactic bus station, and it's basically this wide area, and it's got, you know, those things with the turnies that people go through, and on like the train station. And yeah, I know I really suck at drawing these, and there are people go la 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 la, I'm going la 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 la, and over here are like the big bay, I mean really big white doors, and this is where the personal spacecraft and things are stored. So you might have a beam ship behind this door, not seen. You got to go down like hallways, and you know, just like if you were boarding an airplane, you know, you got to have that. It's somewhere above us or below us or wherever it may be hovering at the time. And this is what I call the Intergalactic bus station, because you go back and forth. And people come up here whenever there's an intergalactic summit in which we Earthlings are involved. 14, 15 years ago. Wow. And I was like, ooh, let me pull all of my online friends in it. And so we would have these big online groups where we would just remote view stuff. We remote viewed, and then we started like experimenting. So first we were remote viewing other parts of the world. Then we're going into the past. Then we're going into the future. Then we're going into people's heads. And we're like breaking every rule there should be. We were the rudest, nastiest group. And it was hilarious because we go to like other places where people are like not expecting to see these guys run through, and you know, and we're like purposefully looking like anime characters. And I know this because I actually got to be aware once when I went, and that was a pretty interesting situation. So like it was, oh gosh, I don't remember what year it was, 2004 maybe, 2006, I don't remember now, but all I know is I knew I had been going to work a lot, and every time I went, you know, I would tell myself, I've got to remember to push for these certain things, because I felt like maybe my voice was being heard, you know? And at the time, I was in contact with this guy with MUFON. You need to push for disclosure, he'd tell me, because he knew, you know, it was like, you know. And so I started pushing for disclosure, or so I told myself every day. I don't know if I really was. I was probably, you know, the girl serving coffee. But the thing about the
astral and the metaphysical realm is it's all form free. It's even more form free than peanut butter, so it doesn't stick. And so, you know, one thing I figured out really fast is that in the astral realm, if you were really creative, you were basically the equivalent of a super hacker. And you can do all sorts of stuff because your mind is like the super most powerful tool you've got out there. And remote viewing expanded into other stuff, and we started trying to affect things physically, and that's how we learned some things.
So it was after this big summit in which we all had went, and I was feeling pretty pleased with myself, you know. I knew that I had won, or the fight had been won, and disclosure had been agreed upon. So we're in, like, to go home, where everybody's lining up, and there's people. I mean, there's people everywhere leaving to go home, and they're all going that way, you know, towards the personal ships. And I'm sitting there gloating. Hee hee, we got disclosure. I won. I won. Of course, in the memory, I didn't remember what, you know. I knew it was something I had been fighting for, that, you know, my mundane life friends would be wanting. And I'm there, and then I don't remember how the conversation started, but there was this guy, and I can barely remember his face. I remember he had your typical, you know, white American brown hair that can be cut and flied, and he had it in a short cut. He was wearing like a dark gray business suit. And so I think part of it was aliens were going to, like, coexisting with us publicly, like moving in next door. And he said something about how he didn't, you know if aliens living on the planet with us was safe, you know, and now because of this disclosure and things being opened up, they were going to be coming in, and and the world was going to be changing. And there's apparently a whole lot of in the know politicians and people in power who are actually really concerned about something like that. They worry that it's, you know, going to be the end of the human race, like, forever. And his reservations kind of annoyed me. I mean, I knew that I'm human standing there talking to this guy, you know, and he had just expressed really big reservations about aliens living with us and being on planet. And so I couldn't help it. You know, I was like, well, we've, indicating that I myself was, you know, an alien or something. We've been on planets for years. We're everywhere. You don't know where we're at. I mean, you know, you could, you know, you're, you know, I was like, isn't it great? Now we get to be public about it as if I was an alien too. And the guy was like, oh my goodness. So we learned that there's just some things you don't do. For example, tampering with people's minds. Not cool. We learned not to coast with certain people that were like, don't touch anything. And they're saying, I'm not touching it, but they're putting their big toe on it, you know. Or you tell them, open the door. And they go through all this drama to open the door because they've decided that turning the doorknob would not be a good thing. And so you end up having to just turn the doorknob and open the door and walk past them while they literally are trying to turn into a piece of paper to slide under the door. Because heaven forbid they just follow instructions. I got taken out of line, being escorted away by someone who took me very gently. I might, I don't know, I couldn't see the person. I knew it was male, and I have like an impression of dark green, you know, as I was taken away from the situation and the scared politician whom I had scared, and everybody's still walking by as if nothing had happened. And they brought me into this big room. And it was window, 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 and you could see space, 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 the final frontier. These are the voyages of the MILAB Jennifer. Her continuing mission to be completely obnoxious to everyone And there was this guy. He was a very calm individual. He's sitting there at this big wooden desk. I don't remember there being any insignias or flags. It was just a very nice, the walls were shiny silver. I'm standing there, not contrite, I'm definitely being talked to, very calmly. That's not how you behave, you know. You just don't say things like that to them. They get upset, and just basically the whole gist of the very calm conversation, which was, I don't know, a reprimand, a lesson, a please behave yourself. And he brought up people's freedoms and the levels of controls that would be imposed upon the planet. And I said something that indicated that I agreed, but then I thought to myself, if we as mankind could finally get to the stars the way we've been fantasizing about, since we realized, you know, since sci-fi books were being written with hollow moons and actually get out there in the stars, this level of control being imposed on us, that's being imposed on us now that I was actually told about, wouldn't be possible because we would be too far spread out. And I kept that thought to myself. I was very careful to keep that thought to myself, because I knew that if they knew that I had figured that out, they would take measures to stop it.
And then as we started doing actual research and learning about the real world, we learned, hey, wait a minute, roller coasting isn't a new thing after all. So the toy stopped being so interesting.
It's not a game anymore.
It's not a game anymore. But then you know, there's rules, and one of the rules is if you're asking somebody, all right, what do you see? Do you see like a unicorn? Okay, what that is you're feeding them. You're hoping they'll see the freaking unicorn. Shut up! Shut up and let them tell you what they see, because because the mind is all powerful, you're going to automatically stick that unicorn into their head. Don't do it. I mean, you know, you can always tell when someone doesn't know what they're doing because they're feeding. And God knows I used to make the same mistake, because God knows I really wanted to meet somebody who'd been to the hill. So I would drag everybody to the hill. I am an asshole. I am a total asshole. And I learned that was selfish and petty, and you just don't do that.
The thing I remember is about those days is, here's Earth. Okay, there's like the Earth, and then there's the moon, and then there's planet, planet. And I remember that there was altercations happening all of the time, and so we had like this kind of like a war zone area almost, but not really. You were kind of patrolling, but it's space, and when it comes to space, you know, you've got like, how you navigate is you have a box, and you've got to navigate to the middle, which means you've got to figure all these points, and yeah, that's how you navigate. So it's kind of hard to go, let's go to the coordinate up here, you know. So, I mean, yeah, there's like all these. If I were to tell somebody a coordinate around Jupiter, it would be a predetermined number set, okay? Don't ask me how I know this, I don't know. And it would be like a chart, and then they would use the square to triangulate how to get there. Of course, this is for hyper jumping, but anyway, so there's this area where people are just kind of meeting up, and these guys that want to just take the Earth are meeting up, and then Earth Space Command is meeting up, and boom, 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 big fight, defending at the time. So this was happening like all the time, you know, and I knew it, and somewhere between like the Jupiter area, you know, it was a really wide space, like here's the moon, really wide space that's the border that is protecting us. I don't know why not telling us about this is such a good idea, because what if they get through? If they get through and they come in, what should be home defense, which is us, would be like, what the hell?
So now let's talk about bouncing. Bouncing is a technique I figured out when I was like 12 years old. It's a memory recovery technique. Everyone does it automatically. There is nothing new under the sun. No one single person invented this technique. Okay.
You remind me of the babe.
What babe?
Well,
The babe with the power.
What power?
Well, gosh, the power of voodoo.
Voodoo?
You do, don't you remember?
Oh, yeah.
That's bouncing.
There's like factions that had to do with this. There was like, you know, our space invaders. These are the guys that want to take our country, that is the various countries of Earth. Okay. Then you have our farmers. The farmers, well, no, farmers is good, but they're more like husbandry. They are the ones that have been minding the crop, as it were, and tending to us. And right now we are very numerous, and this means that we're very close to being harvested, because that's what happens. That's why there's been 3 or 4 cataclysms on the planet. They kind of take us all up, and like you would a field of wheat or corn. And they are defending against the space invaders. Okay. While this is going on, and this is at least happening for the 2nd time, there is the fact that we are once again a big civilization, and so we're trying to prove ourselves, trying to prove ourselves sentient, and we've got a lot going against us for that, and the fact that the control measures are being imposed upon us are partly out of greed, partly out of fear, and partly because maybe perhaps some of them have made a deal with this on the agreement that they were not harvested, which also has happened in the past. You're always going to have traitors like that. The space invaders used to get through on occasion, and if you look at history, you'll see times that they managed to get through. And they each have different agendas. It depends on the invaders, and so I can't really predict that they're just not allowed in. And then there was this small group that I remember, because I remember like having feelings of at least watching them closely and curiosity. And I think of them as like a Greenpeace for aliens. You must be nice to these humans. They deserve to be treated with respect, and everything that, has been said in regards to, how elephants need to be regarded these days, because in some countries elephants are actually considered sentient, and by the way, they are. Mind you, when we see an elephant, we don't necessarily see something that's an equal to us because he doesn't have a thumb and hands. Well, in my opinion, they're equal. They're just not, in good bodies to do space travel, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't happen so that one day they could. I mean, anything is possible. But so when we see this elephant, we recognize that he's sentient, but that's as far as it goes. And when it comes to these Greenpeace aliens, this is how I feel that they see us. If we want to have some of the abuses that's heaped upon us, and among other things, we need to have our sentience recognized, then the whole world will open up for us to fight for other rights and alien rights. And you have to keep in mind that the Greys and the reptilians and all of them, they don't think like we do because they are not like us. So this means that their slavery laws are different, and they do have slaves. But when you're recognized as sentient, the quality of being treated like that changes because you're sentient. It's a difference. There's regard for your feelings. There's a consideration. Is this hurting you? We'll do something about it. Doesn't mean you'll stop being a slave. It just means things will change. And it's a big stepping block for us. We need our sentience recognized.
But that's bouncing. And it can be very, very powerful. You just have to be really careful with that technique, because people will lie to you to get attention, and also lie to themselves. But if you keep it pure and hold everything suspect and leave the ego at the door, you can get pretty far. I've uncovered a crap load using bouncing. Kill Logan. Kill Logan. Okay, Logan is now dead. Wait. See? This is how super powerful we are.